All right, welcome back to our next Start Some Good Fireside Chat and our last for 2025. And it's one that I've been really looking forward to because, as an ecosystem builder myself, I love being able to chat to other ecosystem builders about, that particular work of trying to catalyze, coordinate, connect, lots of good C words, an ecosystem around, an emerging practice like social enterprise. And there's no one better I could talk to about that than Nicola Nation, the former CEO of Akina Foundation. And I'm sad that rolls off the tongue so well. It's sad that's we can't continue to introduce you as that, but I guess we can introduce you as ex-CEO of Akina Foundation for a little while. Just before I dive in, though, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I haven't even said who I am. I don't want to take for granted that everyone has come to a previous event or watched the previous videos. I'm Tom. I'm the co-founder and these days the entrepreneur in residence at Start Some Good. And I want to acknowledge that I'm hosting this call from the traditional lands of the Camaragal people of the Eora Nation and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging as well as my respects to all the traditions represented by wherever you are when you're watching or listening to this, the country you're on, and your own personal traditions and practices as well. Thank you, everyone who's coming along and listening, tuning in live or on repeat later on. So, Nicola, thank you so much for capping off. I'm not saying this is like, the final touchstone on your year, but it's been a huge year for you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come and kind of have a think about what it's all meant with me.
Kia ora. Thank you, Tom.
So the big, Akina Foundation, to kind of set a picture for others, was what I've been calling kind of pioneering social enterprise ecosystem builder in New Zealand. Certainly they were played an important role even in my kind of education and journey in social enterprise. They hosted the Social Enterprise Board Forum in Christchurch in 2017. And that was, somewhat surprisingly, this incredibly important catalytic event for the Australian ecosystem because it actually brought everyone together from all the different states in a way that hadn't happened before to somewhere else, Christchurch, and actually was really an important milestone, I guess, in some of the evolution of the sector over here and inspired a lot of future activities, including eventually Australia hosting the Social Enterprise World Forum in Brisbane some years later, where Nicola and I took out the debating championship as a team as well. So that's kind of been my main kind of interactions with Akina through the years. But do you want to tell us kind of, what's your version of the Akina story, how it started and the kind of work that you guys did?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take a second to introduce myself. Ko Nicola Nation, toka ingoa, and I will pay my respects to the tangata whenua of Aotearoa and particularly Whanganui Atara, which is Wellington, which is where I am beaming in from today. So Akina was initially established in 2009 as the Hikarangi Foundation, and it was a grant-funded organisation that was wholly focused on environmental initiatives. And at that time, it was looking at being an incubator, really, for environmental initiatives that could then spin off and become a wind farm in its own right, or bikes in schools programs, etc., and did some great things. In 2014, interesting that you say that the New Zealand experience influenced the Australian system, because in 2014, Alex Hennant became the first chief executive of, in 2010 of Hikarangi, and he had come out from the UK and had seen this model of social enterprise, which, as you and I know, Tom, has its genesis in Scotland, and he had seen that model being implemented in growth throughout the United Kingdom, and he couldn't see that conversation happening in New Zealand. So in 2014, Hikarangi became the Akina Foundation. Akina is a Māori word that was gifted to us. It means a couple of words in different contexts. It means to be bold, and I'm really proud to say that that's something that we were. But it also means to energize and to uplift, and our role was to energize others, to spread a different way of thinking and to uplift their work, and that permeated, I guess, through everything that we did. And so in 2014, we broadened our focus away from just environmental initiatives to focus on social and environmental initiatives, and then become the champion for social enterprise in New Zealand, which culminated in hosting the Social Enterprise World Forum in Otatahu, Christchurch, which was sadly before my times, but somewhat legendary among social enterprise circles in Australasia and further. So visiting Brisbane in 2022 and meeting all these people who referenced that event. Felt like somewhat heroic, all black, like Richie McCaw like status. It was really nice to see the legacy of that. And in 2018, I've spoken to a few people in the Australian ecosystem about this. We were lucky enough to start a 3-year government partnership called the Social Enterprise Sector Development Program, which was really about setting the New Zealand policy framework up, setting the New Zealand environment up to be as enabling as it could be for social enterprise. And that partnership ran for 3 years, from 2018 to 2021. And I stepped into the chief executive role in 2021. And we existed as largely a wholly self-funded social enterprise from that time.
Mm.
Yes.
And so I'm interested in, while it was before your time, obviously there'd be a lot of law, I guess, and documentation. What was the gap that, you mentioned kind of the conversation was one of the things that Alex saw, to the best of your knowledge, when he kind of came to New Zealand, like the conversation isn't happening. But obviously actually starting a conversation is a really important part of ecosystem building work, getting people thinking and talking. But obviously then you need to go on to add other pieces. What was kind of, to the best of your knowledge from before your time, but kind of how did they define, I guess, the gap that Akina wanted to fill?
Yeah, great question. A lot of that was led with conversations with the trustees at that time, who also were taking inspiration from different models overseas. One of our trustees was Rod Oram, who was very deeply embedded in different kaupapa, including in environmental kaupapa, and he was the chair at that time. And they were really he came from a business background, an economics background, and was really pushing for a different economic model. And I think there was a sense of there's got to be a better way. They could see early signs that the capitalist model wasn't serving us well. And if we continued on down that road, we would, end up with some of the ills that we see today. So a sense that wanting to embed a different way of working into business models. And one thing I should say, and that we later recognised along that journey, was that actually the social enterprise business model was very embedded in Indigenous ways of working and was in many ways the first form of social enterprise in New Zealand. So to say that it was new was not really correct. Indigenous business, putting people and planet at its heart, had been around in New Zealand for a very long time, but perhaps not recognised in that way. So bringing those things together was a really important part of the journey as well. But also, you were mentioning, I know that Start Some Good has done a lot of work with incubators. So the incubators that, again, yes, before my time, Akina was working on were really about creating business models that would continue to succeed and not be reliant on grant funding, and had some trading elements to them. So I think there was a really obvious link between running an accelerator program and sustainability, financial sustainability, to then lead on to positive impact.
Yeah, I think I think part of the dynamic with those who are drawn to, I guess, being an ecosystem builder, it's a particular way of thinking and viewing the world. And, it's interesting in social enterprises, people who are very passionate about social enterprise, very capable, inspiring leaders, but their focus is building their particular enterprise, and so they're good at talking about, the barriers they encountered, how they knocked them out of the way, climbed over them, went under them, went around them, or what have you. But they don't necessarily spend their time thinking so much about, is that the norm? Is that, versus others who, are trying to kind of support cohorts or communities or sectors to grow. And I think part of the dynamic of that is, as soon as you do any one thing, you see the adjacent gaps. And, so I know that you were also involved with, New Zealand's first, as soon as you're involved in accelerators for social impact, for instance, everyone then starts talking about capital, because you work with these companies and you've done the capacity building bit, and, companies need different types of support, capacity building, capital. And so you do one of those, but then if the other pieces aren't there, it's hard to kind of, there's obviously a strong incentive then to try and kind of maybe address that next gap and then that next gap. And I always think one of the challenges of ecosystem way is that you end up with organizations often getting spread across too many parts of that. And so I don't know whether it was all under the Akina umbrella, but you obviously have had experience on the kind of capacity building side through Akina, accelerators and so on, also the investment side.
Yes.
Do you feel like is part of, I guess, the decision, we'll get, I guess, more into, interested in kind of some of the decision making and causation around why Akina has now wound down, but is some part of that there are other pieces in place, or do those gaps exist? Do you think you've kind of demonstrated some model like accelerators, for instance, there are other accelerators now, maybe not as many as you would
Mm,
like, but obviously kind of accelerators as a form factor
mm.
have
Yeah.
been somewhat embraced. Um, where do you see, to what extent have some of these gaps been filled, and to what extent do you think someone else is going to need to step up
Yes.
and now
Yes.
fill them again? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll answer that. There's sort of two parts to that question, Tom.
Mm.
So I'll pick that apart. And we talked about there being three levers in the ecosystem building, three levers of change. And if you think about a startup business, you've got capability building, which your accelerator
Mm-hmm.
can help with that to a certain extent. And as you say, different founders need different things at different times.
Mm-hmm.
And Akina did that. But then the other two big levers were access to contracts and access to capital.
Yeah.
So access to contracts was the great work that is done in Australia and New Zealand around social procurement. So I've got this great business and I really need introductions and access into some of those government and procurements, and corporate supply chains to help that business to flourish, and then access to capital, which you know much more about than I do. So in terms of building the ecosystem, you needed an enabling environment. So you need capital to be floating around, I guess, but you need a policy environment that is sensitive or attuned to that and is supportive of that. And then those three levers can be pushed quite hard. To answer your question around are others doing that, again, what was really interesting, so during my time, we were really starting, my time as general manager, we were starting to push into our consultancy advisory services. And we were seen as and marketed ourselves as experts in impact and impact consulting. And by impact, we mean the positive change that comes about because of an activity. So that might be the positive change that your business is contributing to. And we were supporting businesses and charities to understand that, communicate that, measure that, etc. And what I saw in the 8 years that I was involved was a proliferation, an explosion of experts in impact, and in economic terms, an explosion of competition. And around the board table, we talked about we will know we have been successful when impact has been mainstreamed. And judge me if you will, but I sat at McDonald's just 3 weeks ago, and my tray table came out and it said, we have impact in our community. And I was like, holy heck, McDonald's is talking about impact. And my brain went all sorts of places about the impact of McDonald's. But I thought, gosh, that's incredible that that language has been mainstreamed. And yes, there's a certain amount of impact washing in that. But we also have seen a number of the big four playing in that space as well. So that meant that for our existence, there was competition when we walked in the door through our great relationships to have a conversation with someone about how we could help them, particularly in the corporate and government world. Are others doing that work? Yes, some of the work, but the bit that is missing is the bit that doesn't pay. So hard things are hard. So the hard stuff has not been picked up, which is the advocacy work, the holding governments to account work, that actually, hold on, this is broken, this isn't working. That stuff is the bit that's going to take a little bit longer for that vacuum to be filled.
Yeah. No, it's actually an interesting observation that it's an interesting balance, I guess, in social enterprise, where we're obviously trying to identify where business models can drive the change we want.
Yep.
But inevitably, I think, as you're pointing out, coming across things that can't, like advocacy is hard to do as a business model. I mean, I guess there are some kind of semi-social, I guess, kind of earned revenue lobbying shops maybe through memberships and so on. But obviously the whole sector then, that then pushes down into the fragile SME kind of dominated social enterprise sector to kind of pay for their own advocacy and lobbying. And there's, not something that generally we're in a position to do.
Yes, which is what Akina did try to do. We did
Yeah.
a lot of advocacy work, and often that was the most powerful stuff that we did. And people in the community were like, thank you for doing that. Thank you for raising that issue. And we did it because we felt it was required, not because anyone was paying us to do
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Do you think there is any contradiction, or kind of does this challenge the whole kind of philosophy of social enterprise that we kind of consistently encounter
Absolutely.
things that we can't
Absolutely
do
not.
with social
Absolutely
enterprise?
not.
I don't think so
I
either,
think
but
you're being facetious.
yes, I am. But I'm trying to make an interesting interview. What would you say to people who say that it does challenge it?
Yeah, yeah. Look, That's no, I think what you've raised is an interesting point, and that one thing that I struggled with about I went to meet a very conservative member of parliament, and he was dressed in his pinstripe suit. And that's great. We had a great conversation about social enterprise. And the phrase that he said to me, Tom, and it's really stuck in my head, was he said, I can see how this is a good model to mop up the externalities. At which point my brain just exploded, and I was like, wow. So, in your view, these great social enterprises are there to mop up the mess that all the businesses that are focused on profit are creating. And that was a real turning point for me where I thought, sure, not every business is going to be a social enterprise, but every business needs to care about its externalities, and every business has a moral and social obligation and obligation to its shareholders and its employees and its customers to have to minimize its externalities. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is where, you pointed out McDonald's claiming to be all about impact is clearly overselling it, and people get cranky about that, greenwashing, purpose washing, and so on. And I
Sure.
always I think it shows we're winning.
Yeah.
Similar to, obviously we can't just accept their word for it, but the fact that they're even trying to bullshit us a little
Yes.
bit, you know,
Yes.
that they are taking the effort to claim to be greener or more impactful than perhaps they really are, shows
Yes.
culturally kind of where the tide is pushing. And that is the piece I think that really is mainstreaming. And while people get cynical about that, I always try to remind them that's actually like a sign of progress. They didn't used to care
Yeah.
enough. They didn't used to think it mattered enough to pretend. And
Yes.
now, naturally, they're seeing what they can get away with. And so now it's on us to, not let people kind of get away
I
with
totally agree.
serious
Yeah.
claims. But yeah.
Yeah,
But
because I think it opens up a conversation around authenticity, which is I can ring McDonald's New Zealand and go, hey, you're talking about your impact in the community. Can I just have a chat about your environmental impact or your impact on obesity rates? And let's talk about your impact holistically. And
mm,
to do so, that's both sides of the equation.
yeah.
Yeah, it
And,
opens it
you're,
up.
you're not probably going to become a social enterprise anytime soon, but you can be more social through
Yeah,
steps. And I
absolutely.
guess this brings us back in some ways to our debate at Social Enterprise World Forum Brisbane 2022. This is what we were both saying and why we were on that team is that, we both care about, I guess, trajectory, not just
Yes,
a line. And I think one of the
yes,
if you become somewhat too fixated, I think it's obviously certification is important, and that's important work done in the ecosystem. That's a important part of the puzzle. But in terms, I guess, what we were
yeah,
drawn to, when you become too obsessed with that single line, you miss how much progress happens on either side of it. As
mm,
businesses become more social, they're still not a social enterprise by any means, but
mm,
very big companies making small but meaningful steps actually adds up to a lot of impact. When there are McDonald's or a Walmart becoming the biggest user of private solar in America. They're bad in lots of other ways, but they're good on energy these
yeah,
days, And so you got to kind of and when Walmart decides to go hard into solar, they have more rooftop than
yes,
any other, So those are big changes, but still leave them well short of that line, much as McDonald's is still. And so yeah, if you fixate on that line, I feel like it makes
yes,
that conversation harder to say what's the
yes,
next thing you could do, or you're doing this piece
exactly.
well. Have you thought about this other piece? You still won't be a social enterprise, but that will actually make a big difference to take that step.
And let's be honest, you've got to start somewhere. So
Yeah,
if you're starting with your solar, I mean that's pretty pretty epic. But yeah, that might feed through to you thinking about your products or those types of things.
yeah, exactly. And every time when Walmart has, don't mean to be spending quite so much time talking about the positive aspects of Walmart. They do a lot of they destroy local economies and don't pay their staff properly, or and are anti-unions and do lots of bad things as well. But they have when they decide they want to be seen to be more impactful, they demand more sustainable products. And again, they're as one of the
That's right.
biggest buyers, everyone else kind of jumps to
Yeah.
do what they need to do to continue to work. And I guess that's the power. You mentioned the procurement, your third C contracts, which I really like. Actually, it wasn't a
Mm.
kind of we often talk about the three kinds of capital: financial, intellectual, and relational.
Right.
But I like your three
Yeah.
C's of capability, contracts, and capital as like the practical
Yeah.
elements as well. And of course, part of capability is capability in finding contracts. But I think the piece that
Yes.
so many people don't get, this is a huge opportunity, as we say, as big companies look to become more social. What that often means is just letting someone else do the hard work for them, by buying
Mm.
that social goodness in by from
Mm.
through procurement. But we got to have the suppliers who are ready for that. And what I think a lot of people don't
Mhm.
realize is that often the capital is the piece that's holding the contracts back because of the change in payment terms or the need to kind of scale up production first. That's something we've seen a lot here with enterprises we've worked with when they have an opportunity to step up to a more of
Mm.
a B2B procurement type system. Sometimes just having to wait 3 months rather than paid on delivery, or paid on
Mm.
delivery rather than
Yeah.
paid up front, makes it really impossible for them to kind of take that step. Is that something you guys used to see a lot in New Zealand as well? People who kind of the product was right, someone was willing to buy it,
Yeah.
but just the kind of payment terms and the operating capital made it really hard for them to make that next logical step?
We saw both sides of that actually, Tom. So what Akina did do that it was very hard for the social enterprises we were working on behalf to really appreciate was we worked with corporate procurement people. So I'll take New Zealand Post as an example to say, look, great that you want to get some social enterprises into your supply chain, but before you do that, can we just look at what your insurance policies are likely to be like? And can we just look at what your payment terms are going to be? So we were actually trying to change the system, the ecosystem at that macro level, so that then when they went to work with the social enterprises, it was not going to fall over, and it was not going to penalise the social enterprise to be more fit for purpose. So we were working on trying to build the capability, sure, but actually change the system at the contracting end as well. So yes, we did see that. It's interesting that you were talking about the supply of capital, because in my experience, there is actually capital out there that's looking for impact. So what I was finding is that chatting to some of the banks, they were thinking about setting up impact-led funds that were investing in impact, but they were concerned about, was there the maturity of the organisations, the social enterprises, to receive it? And that was really heartbreaking, because you're like, oh, I'm not saying there was loads of money floating around, but there was capital searching for the right opportunities and to get it ready in time, the pipeline issue. And it was the pipeline of the enterprises being ready that was really becoming an issue in New Zealand.
I mean, this is the thing I find, I think it's hard not to feel a little bit. I mean, in some ways, it's the thing that makes you hopeful, and the thing that makes you frustrated at the same time is that there is this, that all the pieces are there. They said the capital, there is capital, like lots of capital out there. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
much of it is maybe not at the kind of terms that I would like to see, kind of in terms of,
Exactly.
like how you balance commercial and impact. But in terms of like money that has been stamped kind of for impact, $1.5 trillion was put into impact funds last year, according to GIN, Global Impact Investment
Yeah.
Network. But there's now $3 trillion apparently in those funds, which kind of shows you like it's banking up. And that shows that mismatch of, the money's kind of there, but for whatever reason, I thought, but can't find the right deals. And then, but the contracts are there, people who want these products, big brands, big companies who the easiest way to improve their social performance is just to swap out, non-social suppliers for more social suppliers of relatively similar products, and they're keen. And then we know the companies are there, I think in many cases, maybe not quite ready, often need a bit of, wraparound support and what have you. But certainly I think there's lots of great products and really great founders and enterprises who are more than capable of stepping up and making a big difference. Yeah, but it's kind of not cohering at the moment. And I guess that's where I feel like you need an Akina. And it's certainly, as you said, the hard stuff's hard stuff. And this kind of cohering and bringing together is weirdly the piece that is not paid, the kind of just sitting on money and managing an impact fund, even one that's not really deploying the money or making much impact. That's well paid. But
Yeah.
sitting inside a big corporate talking about how you wish you could do more social procurement, that it's too hard. It's well paid. Other
Yes.
people get kind of well paid to kind of not solve these
Yes.
problems. But there's this kind of missing piece, I feel like, that brings that together somehow. And do you, I mean, just from afar, I feel like, how would I feel if, I don't know, Social Enterprise Australia and Social Traders, both shut down? I would feel really worried about,
Yes.
how that was going to dent our ecosystem.
Yeah.
I guess, how do you think that's going to show up in a way, kind of going forward with New Zealand with that? Is there another organization that you see kind of stepping into this field, the cohering piece, the like taking all the other things that are going on, but trying to bring them together in the way that Akina traditionally has?
Yeah, good question. Probably a bit early to say. We worked became really apparent when we looked at everything we did, and we were wanting to find homes for it, just how much we did. So that
Yeah.
Akina as a whole was broken up into about 7 different parts, and we handed it off to different new, what you call them, kaitiaki or guardians, new owners of that. And some of that, and so I literally downloaded things from our drive and shipped it off and said, just call me if you've got any questions, and have been trying to support organisations to keep our mahi alive. our worker life, but the actual advocacy part is taking a little bit longer. There are some organizations, but not really. We were so unique, weren't we? Like, there's not even anything in Australia that was really like Akina.
No, exactly. I try to explain to some people that I always have to like combine two or three organizations to give people a sense
Yes.
of kind of the role you play. Like I said, like a social administrator, but also kind of a social traders.
Yeah.
And then they did start some good type stuff as well. Um,
Yeah.
what
So
are those? Did
maybe
you
that's the
know off the
rub.
top of your
Maybe
head?
that's
Could
the
you tell us
learning.
what the
Sorry.
seven? I think it'd be a great way of helping people understand all the different things an organization does. What were the seven things? I guess if you or as many of them as you can articulate
Yeah.
off the top of your
So
head.
well, there was the three C's. So there was our capability building work. So we had a whole lot of tools and intellectual property that could be useful for others. That we shared off. We had a very large social procurement suite of tools and resources, some of which we shared with social traders and some that we developed in conjunction with social traders. We had an impact investment readiness program that I think you are the most familiar with, where we received grants in and evaluated startup enterprises to see if they were ready to receive a grant. So there was a whole lot of processes and tools around that. We had developed a impact measurement tool, and that we were really keen for that to have a home, and we have gifted that off. We had our impact enterprise fund in and of itself, so our shareholding in that needed to go somewhere. That's five. There were definitely another couple. Our website that had all our resources on it was called the Impact. The Impact. I own the Akina domain, but that's out of the goodness of my heart. So I was like, oh well, that might be useful. So I renewed the website. Probably from my own good as much as anyone else's. But there's some other amazing resource called the Impact Initiative, and an organisation that we work closely with to develop that. They have taken on that, and they will continue to keep that live as well. So yeah, so it's all not lost or sitting in
No.
my emails.
Yeah, that's amazing. No, but it is a good illustration of all those different pieces of the puzzle that you have kind of worked on. There's adjacent challenges. Impact measurement, is another one that we haven't touched
Yeah.
on, but is a commonly cited kind of adjacent challenge to a lot of these things. Although I've started to become slightly convinced overstated. Not to say it's not important, but I feel like the people for whom I've started to think some of the people for whom impact measurement is not good enough, it'll never be good enough. Because
Well, it's an
it'll
imperfect
never be
science.
as simple and as clear and as black and white and as easy to read and as kind of cross-referential as commercial metrics. Like if you know how to read a P&L for one company, you can read them for any company, basically. I mean, it's kind of this fundamental advantage of pure commerce is it's
Yeah, I
all
love
kind
it,
of,
Tom. You and I think so alike, because I'm like, well, intuitively, if you waited for the impact model to build a school, you would wait 15 years before you built a school. But intuitively, you
yeah.
know that the impact of educating people is a good thing.
Yeah.
So
Before you build the
to
second one, you build a school, and then you wait 15 years to really make sure that they compare to a control group and la la la. Yeah,
so
exactly.
yes, measurement, and then there's common sense, and you've
Yeah,
got yeah,
and also just who should do it, and I don't think it should be the social enterprises. Companies don't do all
agreed.
these like long term. I mean, that's obviously it sounds like an important thing that government should do is like cross
Yes,
reference different types of schooling practices
yes,
over
yep,
decades. But it's an absurd expectation for a
yes.
education startup
A
of
really
anything.
absurd expectation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I use
yeah.
an example because I did work when I was in Silicon Valley. I worked for a company called Hope Lab, and they were a non-profit but building tech products, games and devices for social good. But they had the soul of a research institute, not a company. And did
Yeah.
mean like they were like super early on fitness trackers. They had a product called Zamzi, which was like the first that like before Fitbit blew up, before anyone. But
Mhm.
they worked with a control group and spent years making sure that it really
Yeah,
did
perfect. Yeah,
genuinely change the
yeah,
physical practices of young people
yeah.
versus non-Zamzi use. And by the time they'd
No one
like
cares.
proven it, the market had completely moved on, and it was kind of they kind of lost the market completely. You need kind of it was really fascinating to kind of
It's
be
a
there at that
fantastic
moment. And
example.
yeah,
Yeah,
and it was an interesting project because they were kind of a pet non-profit, and since they were kind of all of our ideal in a way. They had one like maybe not my ultimate ideal, but certainly sounds kind of nice, which is almost all their money came from one billionaire. who was, so they pursued things that she was interested in and so on. But yeah, just felt there wasn't quite the hunger there. They weren't like hustling
Yeah.
to fundraise, they weren't hustling to sell, they were learning things, and that was awesome. But yeah, it is that, they are the old example of a social enterprise who decided that they would do that at a
Mm,
scientific grade. And I
mm,
can say, it didn't work with any kind of
mm,
innovation or fast moving market. Um,
mm.
so yeah, it's all these, I mean, yeah, how all these pieces fit together. It's such an interesting thing. Look, I feel like we've been kind of maybe beating around it a little bit, and we should just kind of have a direct moment and say, why did Akina shut down? We
Oh,
obviously
yeah,
reference
sure.
the work it did, how important it was, trying to hand over the
Yes,
pieces, and now obviously, businesses shut down because the resources don't match the needs, etc.
yeah,
But so there's a simple answer. But I guess kind of talk us through
yeah,
that process. I guess why you decided not to. I mean, I think people often
yes,
push through until everything falls apart. You
yes,
guys didn't. You did more of a conscious wind down. But I
yes,
always feel like picking them
yes,
out. I've never been any good at that myself because I'm always like kind of dysfunctionally optimistic around things being about to like turn around and happen. So I never kind of have planned, I've never been very good at kind of planning the closure of things because I will go
sure,
until I'm burnt out. Everything's a disaster
yeah,
around me, and only at that point can concede defeat. So the way you did it was really good. But I always think picking that
thank you.
moment where you
Yes,
switch, where you make the decision while you still have enough resources left, resources that could be used
yes,
in theory, hustling like crazy and trying to save it, but instead you spend that time to do the responsible thing and wind down. How did you know it was
yeah.
that point? And I guess what was the experience like of having to call it?
Yes, yeah, yeah. And that's the potentially $1 million. I'll never know if we did it too early. We'll just
Mm,
never know. And so you have to be, but had definitely got to the stage where I was comfortable that it was the right thing to do. And someone asked me, they said, "Oh, how did you feel when the board said that you were going to close?" And I said, "The board didn't say we were going to close. I recommended to the board that it was the most
mm,
responsible thing to do." So felt a lot of ownership over that. So Akina we'd been trading on in good faith for some time. But myself and the three trustees, we were working through a lot of uncertainty, and we quite quickly got to the point where we needed to be led by three principles. And the three principles that we came together and asked ourselves about once a month was, what's the most responsible thing to be doing? What's the thing that we should be doing that's right by our people, or he tangata, the value of people? And then what's the decision that we can make that has the most integrity? So they sound similar, but they're actually different. So what's the decision that is responsible? So by that, I was very aware that the trustees were directors of Akina, and that meant that they signed up to certain things. So we had to be responsible directors and stewards of this, right? So what are we meeting our legal obligations? And we got lots of advice about that to say that yes, we were. Everything was good in that regard. So we weren't trading recklessly. So great, tick. And then what's the best decision to make for our people? So that was my team. And then what's the decision that has the most integrity? And I was in a position where we had two vacancies for various reasons. And I was about to make two different job offers. And I knew what I knew about our cash situation and about our pipeline. And I thought, hand on heart, I thought, can I bring two new people into this organization? It was within budget, it was within my delegated authority. We were give or take on budget for the year, but there was all of this uncertainty. And like I say, I knew what our cash runway was like. And I couldn't. I couldn't hand on heart bring two new people into the organization with the level of uncertainty that we were operating within. And I went to the board and I said that. And they said, "Well, I think then that's the decision." And I said, "Yes, I
mm,
think it is." And we have an off ramp, we have an opportunity to deliver all of our work. We have an opportunity, we can pay all of our staff, everyone can get a month's notice, everyone can get their holiday pay, etc., etc. And there were still processes to go around that. Through legislation, we had to go through consultation and things, but we had the time. And if
yeah.
we'd given it another month, we might not have had the time. That decision might have been taken from us, and then
Mm,
liquidators would have been called in, and it would have been very messy and very ugly. Now, what that meant, Tom, is we went through the process with our team, where we would go through a consultation process as prescribed by legislation, and then the decision was finalised. And this was heavy and never, so that was pretty tough, right? Telling the team that everyone was losing their job. I had to make myself redundant. And then I had to ring every single client and say, "We can deliver your work. we will be closing. It needs to be delivered by this date. And by the way, if you could pay me in advance, it would be helpful.
How did that go?
Everyone was amazing,
Hmm.
absolutely amazing. So like, we're so sorry to hear that. Totally understand. It's a really tough time. What can we do to help? Etc.
Hmm.
etc. Absolutely amazing. To the extent that there was one piece of work, we closed on the 30th of April, and one piece of work wasn't finishing until June. And the client let the staff member who was moving to a new organisation take the piece of work with him and finish it at his new organisation. So just
Oh, wow.
people were incredible.
That's really flexible and
Yeah.
trusting, I
Yeah. So
guess.
they were very, very, very kind. But it was a pretty tough day to be working the phones.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. But I
Hmm.
think being really transparent about where we were and why we were and answering people's questions honestly and yeah, yeah, and undertaking to commit to deliver the work. It sounds strange to say that I'm really proud of that, but I am really, really proud of that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally get that. When Renata and I decided that, we were ready to start some good under new management a little while ago and focus more on Lend for Good, that was the most important thing to us as much as possible was, can we do this in a way that just doesn't disrupt the work, like the programs? Because also those are our friends and allies.
Right.
Um,
That's right.
as well. So that was,
Yeah.
kind of a really important consideration of finding the right new partners and home for our programs as well,
Yes.
which
Yeah,
was
exactly. Exactly.
um,
And I think doing it early enough so you've got some ability to influence it, to be in control the narrative and to do it in your way rather than it being done to you.
yeah.
Yeah, it's quite
It does sound
empowering.
like, you said it wasn't too early. I mean, it sounds like, it wasn't, said if a month later might have been too late. And I mean, it sounds like it was a useful forcing mechanism in a way, having those two jobs and kind of having to,
Yeah.
that kind of in some ways bringing forward a decision point.
Yeah, that's a
Um,
great insight, actually, Tom, because I think it was one thing around people who had worked for Akina for a period of time and were hanging in there, knowing that everything wasn't rosy, but were hanging in there, versus someone coming in new, being excited about this role, being inducted to
yeah.
an
Maybe saying
organization,
no to something else.
all
Yeah.
of that. That just even my tummy's tuning now. Like it just did not feel right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's not, certainly I've had the experience in my various startups of recruiting people saying, but also we only have like 4 months runway. Don't worry. I'm going to figure it out. But just so you know,
Yeah.
that's where we're at right now. But your help and we're working on it. And we still believe that's just, where we're at in the startup journey. And
Yeah.
but I guess at a certain
Yeah,
point,
that's
when you've
right.
been around for 14 years and so on, people are expecting to, that's not necessarily, the vibe or context people are looking for or expecting when they join a
Yeah, and look,
supporting
in
board.
New Zealand, I know it's similar in Australia. We were in a deep recession that has gone on much, much longer than people expected. And the political, so that was drying up our corporate work. And the political environment had been turned on its head and continued to do so. For example, we had a supplier diversity target in government contracts. 8% of government contracts needed to go to diverse suppliers, which included social enterprises. That was scrapped. So overnight, no government agencies had any reason to
Mm.
be calling me. So we had the political pressure and the recessionary pressure combined with low cash reserves. So yeah,
That's interesting. I had
perfect
actually, I
storm.
guess, just seen, some of the sequencing in terms of change of government, and then not that long afterwards. Um, I just assumed that you had that had government funding of some sort that had been pulled by the new government, but it sounds like it's more how they then affected the market and demand for
Yes,
procurement rather than
that's right.
directly withdrawing funds.
That's right.
So maybe my
Yeah.
questions changed slightly, but one of the questions I want to ask you with that misunderstanding in my mind, but maybe it's irrelevant, is just, I guess, where we're at in the Australian ecosystem is, social enterprises straight after social enterprise world forum New Zealand, that kind of led to the creation of all the state, the kind of, it took time and didn't
Mm.
happen immediately, but kind of, I think that was a trigger for the rollout of the state-based peak bodies. And then a couple of years ago, the feeling was that it needed to be a national one. So we got that.
Hmm.
And, not just purely as a result of their efforts, but a few things coming together. The last budget had the first ever direct funding for
Mm.
social enterprises from federal
Yeah,
government. Now, social enterprises have got bits of funding
very
before through
exciting.
different programs, but the first program that had social enterprise, the first time the
Yeah.
word social enterprise had appeared, I guess, in a budget. Um,
Yes.
and a lot of celebration for that. You want to kind of celebrate the steps forward, even if you can't help. I can't help being a little bit cynical. Sometimes we were losing our minds over $12 million at the same time as they were committing $400 million for a new football stadium in Hobart, just to see how we're stacking up as a priority. But I guess I want to ask you about kind of the risks, I guess, of while we certainly, obviously, big believer in the power of government to get things done and the need for government to fund a bunch of things, particularly where there's market failure. I don't think we can social enterprise our way to universal justice and access and so on. There's a bunch the government has to do. So that's important work. But by the same token, of course, the more that we kind of secure government support, the more the sector or parts of it or individual organizations become reliant on that. And government priorities, more so than most things, can change on a dime, as you're pointing out. Like there's an election and boom, whole new policy regime in a way that doesn't happen quite like that normally in corporates and so on. I guess the same thing can happen. New CEO, strategic review, we're doing new things. We've certainly been caught out by that with some of our corporate partners for, who decide to reframe their CSR or whatever, their marketing. But I'm just interested in your thoughts, I guess, on how to maintain, I guess, a balance of where we're trying to get. We need to bring government in. We do need the support to help grow the system to fill some of the gaps that we've talked about already. And yet that risk of kind of either capture or reliance on government.
Yeah. Well, there's an element of evolve or die, right? And I'm sure if your business and or your social enterprises stays static and isn't responding to the market and or political conditions, it's not going to go well for you. I think what we attempted to do, and we did quite successfully at one stage, was to speak the language of both types of government. So the power of government is within the policy and the regulatory changes that it can put in place. But as you say, they can be stripped away. But what you're wanting to do is being able to sell that business case to a liberal government and a conservative government, as well as a teal and a green government in there as well. And for Akina, the way the coalition government worked, whilst we've had the conservative government parts of the government on side, the most right-wing part of the government has managed to have a much higher say, which doesn't necessarily reflect the proportions of the votes, but has managed to impact some of the policy change. What could we have done about that? Not a heck of a lot, really. And I think there's an element of, so we switched to trying to express the arguments as to why this is good for business, why having being purpose-led is good for business, full stop, to try and make the case that, as I said before, it's right for your shareholders, it's right for your consumers, and it's right for your employees. So continuing to beat that drum, I guess, in the hope that warmer days will come. It's a very tricky one.
It is. It's often where I am perhaps less excited about things like, that specific social enterprise development grants, whatever. The people, and I feel like I'm on a bit of an island as well, vis-a-vis, would it be useful to have this is coming back to our debate topic, but would it be useful to have an incorporation type, like a clearly defined, this is a social enterprise as a structure. And I kind of think if our vision about making social enterprise the new norm, not just like a particular constituency or niche, but we do believe that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that can just be as we've talked about, the mainstream expectation of just what a business is. Not all of them will be what is now a certified social enterprise, but all of them will report on their impacts, hopefully incorporated into their plans, I'm not sure any of these like specific niche supports help. When people ask me, what could the government do to help? I always try and think about things that like move the bar for the whole economy. So things like put a price on carbon.
Yes.
Like if you just like put a price on carbon, put a price on obesity. Like if you like just like charge for negative externalities.
Yes.
That's kind of shifting the dynamic of the entire economy in terms of like what things cost and who pays for it.
Yeah.
And in that world, social enterprises will do better. We're kind of designing that world rather than kind of a specific structure, a specific grant. I feel like in some ways that reinforces, even as we talk this game of like systems change, universal change, we end up kind of acting like, another small constituency who wants our little bits and pieces. And I'm not sure they ever add up to that big picture change.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like putting a price on carbon would focuses the mind and levels the playing field to a certain
Yeah, nothing
extent.
like pricing
However,
signals, actually. I mean, much as we all, we're all very purposeful here, and a lot of us do a lot with our purpose. Not,
yeah,
pricing signals are the most, I think, fundamental, powerful thing
yeah.
that
But to
changes
come back
everything.
to your earlier point, Tom, a new government can come in and it can be stripped back. It can be undone.
Yeah, it's true. I guess you could. Yeah, well, we've had that in Australia once already. We did have
Yes.
a carbon market, and it's hard to even
Yeah.
imagine what it might look like 20 years later. How it might have evolved and matured as a concept in the market if we'd kind of just let it go for a while. But yeah. So certainly,
Mm,
yeah, we see that if a lot of businesses launched built on that carbon market, which then got disappeared 3 years
mm,
later or whatever it was. I forget, blink
mm.
of an eye, really. So yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, the challenge, but that's, I guess, true at some level. That's true for all parts of the economy. I mean, they could
Exactly.
always change. They change rules, they change tariffs. I
Yes.
mean, we've seen kind of
True.
how much whims of. I think in our system, it could never be quite the whims of one person in quite the same way. I hope
Yeah.
our boring little
Yes.
parliamentary systems. I feel like if there's nothing else, I've gained a
Yeah.
greater appreciation for them over the last 10 years than I had before. Um,
Yes.
but yeah, so I guess we have to be so. What's the takeaway here? It's not that we push for the support we can get while just being mindful of that dynamic, I guess. And your key point earlier that I want to highlight was trying to make it nonpartisan, I guess, not trying to
Mm,
fall into this is just a Labor priority or just a Greens thing, but rather,
mm,
and it should be, God, it's using business. I mean, like conservative governments
mm,
should prefer it to nonprofits, I think,
mm.
conceptually, and kind of progressives should prefer it to business as usual. So we should be able to get everyone
Yeah.
on board just by kind of focusing, just by framing it slightly differently.
But what springs to mind, Tom, your comment around ecosystem building and us being ecosystem builders is that I think we need to recognize that we need each other.
Mm,
So we need those people who are actually willing to be inside Parliament and fighting that good fight. And we need to find those people and we need to equip them with the facts and figures that can help them. And they need
yeah.
community and they need entrepreneurs. And I think recognition that we all need each other and that we work together, we will have a role to play is really helpful.
So, what are some things you've learned, I guess, about getting to people to think about, kind of, I guess, do you have any tips for people who are trying to do this work? Because I agree, it's needed, and we kind of, this is the classic ecosystem piece, is we need to kind of build pathways between different kind of
Mm,
stepping stones I've described, but connecting this stuff together, thereby making it not kind of nonpartisan, be able to work with different types of people coming from different perspectives is,
mm,
core
mm,
ecosystem building work. I guess what have you learned about how to, kind of
mm,
about how we talk about social enterprise or engage
mm,
people with this story in a way that does bring diverse people on board and isn't just a bunch of,
mm.
you know, traditional progressives.
Yeah, like a slightly different tangent, but one I think that you'll resonate with, Tom, is yeah, as I said, hard things are hard. And I think that my advice to entrepreneurs is to be a bit kind to themselves. And that you can't pour from an empty cup. So you have a vision of where you want to go, be it for your business and or in a bigger sense for your communities and the economy. But if you don't look after yourself, you're not going to be able to do that for very long. And I think that that has been one of my biggest learnings when you're working, like what we were attempting to do at Akina. We talked about when you bow your head, make it to a lofty mountain, right? We had big dreams and big goals. And it was really important to stop and celebrate the wins along the way. It was really important to look after ourselves, to remember that we were one piece of the puzzle. We weren't controlling all of it. And yeah, and that I think doing so gave us the ability to continue on. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah. And I guess we can just hope that some of the same things that catalyzed that for you will inspire that next generation to step up and reinvent. As you say,
Yeah.
we always have to reinvent these things, whether it's in the guise of a single organization or now maybe space
Yes.
has been created for people to pick up and
Yes.
run with some of those different pieces, some of your seven
Yeah.
jigsaw pieces, or
Absolutely.
reimagine how some of this work can get done. Um, we're almost at the end of time, Nicola, but I'm interested in
Yes.
just you as a kind of leader in the space as well. And obviously, I hope that you've, and that you are taking some much
Yeah.
deserved time off after, what was clearly a massive emotional journey, as well as just all the logistical, I can only imagine in some ways, and where, having also been in the process of Starts a Good Australia was acquired, Starts a Good America, which was the holding company we've been winding down. No one ever tells you how much annoying work is involved in just stopping something. I had no idea. It's never been covered in any of the entrepreneurial courses I did, was how to wind down a company. It's like surprisingly annoying.
Yes.
Um, and
Very
so
admin heavy.
yeah, but it's not very satisfying work. Obviously, it's like it's like it's all the stuff I hate most, like lawyers, accountants, reports and so on. But obviously, without actually that adding up to getting to do anything, it's just kind of to shut it down.
Yeah.
The end result is just to stop having to do all this stuff to be at the end of that. So anyway, I hope you're having a very relaxing summer plan. But I'm interested
Thank
in what
you.
you're thinking. We've been talking a lot about it, kind of Akina and who's picking up and running with different parts of it and what someone else might need to
Yes.
do now. But what are your
Yes.
thoughts on what do you plan to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I've fallen into the gig economy and I've been doing bits and pieces here. I'm mentoring a general manager at a business, not a social enterprise, but at a business. I'm currently doing some work in the children's health sector, which is a very impactful sector that I know nothing about. So I'm quite enjoying learning more about that. And I've been doing some social procurement work for a very large, big box retailer that opened yesterday in Auckland, which was very exciting. And they were interested in getting some social enterprises into their supply chain. So at the moment, I'm doing bits and pieces, and being impact led is now just so much a part of who I am and my heart and my way of thinking that I can't imagine doing anything else.
Yeah,
Quite
agree with
like to
that.
build a solar farm because that seems important and quite cool and difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't do anything easy.
No,
The easy things already been done. They don't need
well,
you.
that's right.
Yeah, yeah,
That's right. So,
yeah.
yeah, we'll see. And I'm really fortunate that I've had a really broad career in lots of different areas, and so I'm just exploring a little bit of each to see
Yeah.
where I land.
But I guess, procurement was kind of your specialty before you became a
Yes,
general manager, right? And then a
yes,
CEO, kind of,
yes,
doing all the things as you do.
yes.
So it sounds like you're kind of, at least, standing on that specialty a bit again. And it is such a
Oh, right.
profound piece, I think, such a practical, profound piece is increasing the linkages between those bigger buyers and
Yeah,
smaller
that's right.
sellers. It's
Yes.
turned out, not, I mean, I guess it was one of the use cases we were imagining when we created Then for Good, my new platform, current platform, but it's been such a common dynamic, just showing how common it is for people who have this big opportunity. But again, coming back to kind of that capital piece, or
Mm,
we need another truck now, or we need to scale up our production.
mm,
We'll earn the money to do that from this contract, but we can't earn the money until we've delivered the thing, and we
mm,
can't deliver the thing to a scaled up production. People just get caught in this like incredibly frustrating catch 22. So I think
mm,
anything that any of us can do, I think that's the single most frustrating dynamic I see in the sector, to be honest, because it's the one where they're so ready, actually. There's someone who
mm,
wants their product. There's a big box retailer who is leaning into it and who needs it. So I think it's
mm.
great that you're continuing to fulfill that. And as an entrepreneur,
Thank
as you
you.
know, like revenue is kind of the ultimate balm for whatever else is stressing you out. Just kind of having more money come through the company. It doesn't solve all things. It certainly doesn't solve all the social and environmental challenges in and of themselves that we're working on. But as an entrepreneur or CEO, it's probably the single most relaxing thing is seeing revenue arrive. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I was like that. They're
There
making a
is no
really big difference.
sustainability without financial sustainability.
Yeah, that's right. They're businesses at the end of the day.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that is the interesting. That's the hard thing. And say some days I feel like it seems very clever. Some days I'm very proud of myself and all of us. Look at us. We're doing social change and business together. Other days I'm like, what are we doing? We've decided to try and combine maybe the two hardest things you can ever try and do, build a successful business and actually make a meaningful dent on a social environmental issue. And who thought this was a good idea to try these things at the same time? But um,
You're
when
still
it works, it
smiling.
works. And as you said, hard things are generally where change is to be made. Um, so thank you for all the challenges that you've taken
Thank
on
you,
and
Tom.
pushed through, including the challenge of kind of consciously shutting down a company like Akita in a way that was so respectful, I guess, to your partners and staff. And I think I'm thrilled for you to come and chat to us about it as well. Because again, as much as I said, they don't teach you about the closing down stage of a company in any of the entrepreneurial startup courses I've been part of. People don't talk about them as much either. You hear
Yeah.
about the kind of glorious
Mm.
acquisitions in the commercial
Yeah.
space, who became really
Exits.
rich,
Yeah.
but we don't hear enough about passing things on, the kind of sharing. And I think it's really great. If there's one really fantastic takeaway that I didn't realize before this chat, it's how much is continuing. That while
Mm.
Akina has
Yeah.
shut down, it sounds like, right now, almost all the pieces continue to have an ongoing
Yeah.
life and continue to make a difference
And I
underneath.
think creating that framework for decision making was really helpful for us. So we could keep coming back to it. And
Is that
if we
something you'll
met that,
share or publish in any way, the decision making? Speaking
yeah, I've been
of,
thinking about writing it up actually. Yeah.
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 Well, cool. If you do, let us know, and we will let
Cool.
people in our community know, because that would obviously be, and update the links
Yeah.
attached to this video when we share it with the community, because I think that would be a really practical contribution as well. Because, like I said,
Yeah.
this is kind of
Thanks,
in some
Tom.
ways the most secret part, or the least discussed part of the
Yes.
whole, I think,
Yes.
entrepreneurial
Yes.
journey, particularly in social enterprise nonprofits. We don't have the normal kind of glamorous acquisition
Mm.
kind of dynamic as much. It's more about kind of conscious coupling, decoupling, finding new homes and stewards, preserving legacy, and so on. So thank you for being an example of that and for sharing some of that story with us today. It's really great to see you, Nicola.
Thanks, Tom.
I hope you have a
Nice to
very
join you.
relaxing Christmas summer break. And yeah, I hope we have the
Thank
opportunity to
you.
keep talking, keep learning together, and
Yes.
collaborate
Yeah,
on
definitely.
making change next year and beyond.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Tom.
Okay,
Nice to
so
chat.
speak to you soon. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.